All right, ready to dive in. We've got a really important and honestly pretty fascinating deep dive for you all today. We're taking a close look at the autism spectrum.
Absolutely. And, it's something that we need to talk more about, especially because when we hear those statistics, like 1 in 36 kids in the U.S. being diagnosed with autism, it can be kind of hard to really grasp what that means for people's lives.
It's true, numbers are important, for sure, but they don't tell the whole story. So let's break it down. What exactly is the autism spectrum?
Well, think of it this way. When most people think of autism, they think of it like a single point on a map. But it's really more like a whole continent, full of incredibly diverse landscapes and experiences. And that's where the term spectrum comes in. We're not talking about one thing, but a huge range. Like one of the articles you sent really shows this with how differently people experience sensory input.
You mean the ones about hypersensitivity and hyposensitivity? It's interesting, right? Most people think sensory issues always mean being overwhelmed by sounds and lights. But for some, it can be the opposite.
Exactly. Some crave more sensory input. And that's just one tiny example of how different being on the spectrum can be for each person. But even though there's no single experience, there are some core areas where autistic people might experience things differently. And one of the big ones is social communication.
Yeah, let's talk about that. It's easy to hear social communication challenges and think, oh, okay, maybe they're just a little shy. But it's so much more than that.
Right. It's about understanding those unspoken social cues, things like reading facial expressions or tone of voice, and it's about things like the back and forth of conversations or even just making friends or having romantic relationships. These are things that might seem easy or automatic for some, but they can take a lot of conscious effort for someone on the spectrum.
And that can impact every part of your life. Like I was thinking about that article you sent about autistic adults and deciding whether or not to disclose their diagnosis at work.
That's such an important point. Just imagine navigating all those complex social dynamics of a workplace and then trying to decide, okay, do I tell my boss, my coworkers, what will that mean for me? Especially if it's not a very inclusive or understanding environment.
That's a lot to think about. And it makes you realize how crucial it is for us to create spaces at work, at school, everywhere, really,
Yeah.
where those differences are valued, not just tolerated. And that kind of brings us to this idea of neurodiversity, doesn't it?
Yeah, neurodiversity, it's huge. It's about time we start really understanding what it means. Because it means recognizing that there isn't just one right way for a brain to work,
hmm
and those variations, those differences, those aren't bad things.
Right. It's like we've been trying to fit everyone into these little boxes for so long instead of appreciating all the amazing, unique shapes that people come in.
Exactly. And we see the consequences of that, like all over these articles. Like, think about the challenges that some folks on the spectrum have in certain environments.
Oh, right. Like that example about sensory overload in, say, a crowded shopping mall or a loud restaurant. It makes you realize how important sensory inclusivity is in, well, in design and public spaces in general.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about making the world work for everyone. And speaking of things that make you think, what about that article on special interests? I mean, so often people just focus on the restricted part of that, but there's so much more to it.
Right. The passion, the deep, intense knowledge, that's not a limitation. That's incredible.
It really is. And it reminds us that those interests, they're not just hobbies. They can be pathways to becoming a real expert in something you're passionate about. Like one of these articles actually encouraged autistic people to start their own YouTube channels.
Oh, wow. I love that. What a great idea. Share your passions with the world, right? Find your people. Speaking of which, it makes you realize how important it is to find your tribe, to connect with others who just get you something, honestly, that we all crave, whether we're on the spectrum or not.
Absolutely. Connection is so important. And when we embrace neurodiversity, we open ourselves up to so many new things, new ways of thinking, new ways of problem solving, new ways of, well, of just being in the world.
I love that. And it kind of goes back to that saying, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all experience.
Yeah.
Everyone is unique.
Totally. It really makes you think about all the amazing things we might be missing out on when we don't embrace neurodiversity in all parts of life.
It really makes you think, yeah.
Yeah.
Because when we create a society that truly values and welcomes a diversity of minds, well, then everyone benefits.
It's funny. After a deep dive like this, it's like you don't just learn something new. You really start to see things differently.
It's true. And in this case, it's about recognizing how much autistic individuals bring to the table, like their unique perspectives, their creativity, their incredible ability to focus and really dive deep into their passions.
Right. It's amazing. And it makes you think about something else they talked about in those materials about how Black and Hispanic children are diagnosed with autism at lower rates. That just makes you stop and think.
Yeah, definitely. And to me, that raises a lot of questions about access to early diagnoses and to the right
Yeah.
support services. Because when we see disparities like that, it tells us we still have a long way to go to make sure everyone has the chance to thrive.
I agree. We have to keep these conversations going. It's on all of us to keep learning, keep listening, and keep fighting for a world that's inclusive for everyone.
Absolutely. A world that embraces neurodiversity will be a better world for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's about all the time we have for today's deep dive, but don't stop here. Keep those curious minds engaged. We'll see you next time.